similar, just as there are weight training exercises that may also be more.
Damn, this guy does not do much weightlifting. Um, I want to be really mean because that's what my head says, but I don't think that does anyone a favor.
All that I see is just levels.
Okay, I'm gonna get into this. All right, everyone. Video we're gonna go through. This is Fitness Guy Reacts toward a deal. I'll lay it out there on the front end. CrossFit Guy Reacts because that's what I am. I'm reacting to another calisthenics video. I'll give you some context to it. This guy Thenx or Thenx. I've seen him all over the internet for years. The guy's killing it in terms of subscribers. 7.58 million subscribers. He's a calisthenics guy. Hence the Thenx, I guess. I've watched one of his videos a long time ago where he was bashing CrossFit, and like the guy, in that video he sucked. Like his whole demeanor, everything that's about him, like he just sucked. Like he didn't have much to offer other than a very biased opinion. So I'm gonna go through his video here, which is I haven't watched it, but that's my mindset going in. Is my previous video I watched this guy a few years back was that he sucked, but I have yet to see him. Maybe he's evolved since. Maybe he's doing great. Now I can guess that in this video that's called Calisthenics versus Weights, which one is better? My guess is that if he has his old perspective, it's calisthenics. But if you look at this video, there's no context to that title other than which is better, and that's by design. They need to get clicks. So let's see what we're working with here. I'll scoot off to the side so I can pop the video up there. Oh, I'm going through it with you guys for the first time.
These athletes, it's Chris Heria. It's been long debated. Weights or calisthenics? Which one is best for building strength and muscle?
Okay, so he gives some context at the very front of the video, which is good. Which is better for building strength and muscle? Because both calisthenics and weights do both of those things. Let's hear what his arguments are. Let's see which direction we're going to go.
He asking different types of athletes what they think in their opinion. But first, let's get into the facts about weightlifting and bodyweight training.
Facts. Let's get into the cold, hard facts, because these are super straightforward and everybody understands everything.
Now, the difference between both training methods is that calisthenics or bodyweight training uses your own body weight for resistance, whereas weight training utilizes external weights to create resistance.
Right. Okay. So his main point was talking about the difference between the two is weights could be defined as anything that is lifting an external object, and calisthenics is basically defined as you only moving your own body weight through space. So by those two definitions, they do very different things. Just on a fundamental level, when you're training musculature with something like a weight, you can overload the system via load. So a single rep or lower reps at higher weights is going to have an increased amount of stress to the system just due to the nature of the higher load on that. On calisthenics, you have no option for increasing the load because you are what you weigh. So the way they would increase load would be time under tension. So they would do things slower, more controlled, because it does a similar thing to kind of system overload via actual load. So they do different things. They're a different process, but that's how you would use the two in different ways for building strength. One is to overload the system via the actual weight, and the other one is by doing more holds, isometric contractions, and time under tension, which is important for calisthenics.
Calisthenics training will focus more on building your relative strength, meaning how strong you are relative to your body weight, while weightlifting will usually prioritize absolute strength, meaning how strong you are overall.
What does that mean? So he's saying that relative strength is the maximum force exerted in relation to the body weight or muscle size. And then absolute strength, maximum force can exert with his or her whole body on or part of the body introspectively of body size or muscle size. So they don't build different kinds of strength with regards to what he's saying here. Like body weight would build relative and absolute strength, and weightlifting would build body weight and relative strength as well. Or sorry, absolute strength and relative strength as well, because they both build strength relative to your size. Like you don't change. Not in the individual session. I guess the argument could be made that the type of training you do with your own body weight wouldn't cause the same kind of size gains in the long run as something like overloading a system via external loads, like a weight. But they're both building the maximum force exerted in relation to the body weight or muscle size. They're both building that kind of strength. Just one has the capacity to push the size much further, I think maybe is what he's saying.
While weightlifting will usually prioritize absolute strength, meaning how strong you are overall.
And then he's saying weightlifting prioritizes absolute strength. I think this is like really splitting hairs in reality. Like, I would even say that, like, I'm not even a guy who loves weightlifting that much. I mean, I do it, but I also do plenty of calisthenics. I think they're fantastic, especially for building strength. I think they're both really necessary. But I don't think you can split hairs quite the same way he's saying here. They don't build like vastly different things where weightlifting focuses on absolute strength, because you're always going to be lifting, like it's always your body that's lifting the external load. It just loads it beyond what your body weight could be loaded.
All right, step out here. I've since shaved and changed up the beanie I was wearing. But what I had to go and like sit and think about this for a second, and it threw me off because he was talking about in the context of what the training gives you. Like one prioritizes this over the other. What he's referencing is he's referencing more two different definitions of strength. One strength being relative to your own body weight. So how strong are you relative to your size? And the other one being how strong are you relative to external objects? Can you pick up whatever? So if a 180 pound guy walks up to a 135 pound thing to lift and lifts it, and a 135 pound guy walks up to the 135 pound thing and lifts it, one of those lifts is higher relative to their body weight. So that's referencing an absolute strength. It's 135 pounds. They both can lift it, so be it. Now, between those two, one of them has greater relative strength, which is the guy who's 135 pounds, because relative to his body weight, that 135 pounds lift is bigger. So their strength to weight ratio is higher. Now, when you talk about training calisthenics are always going to be relative to your body weight, which is what I say in the video. Now, absolute strength, when he makes the statement of strength training tends to prioritize absolute strength, it's not true. It's always going to be relative to yourself. It's one of the only ways to build a relative strength higher than what you have body weight wise is to do strength training, because you can overload the system more so than you can with just your body. So maybe that's the heresy he's trying to split here, but if I was confused because he was talking about in the context of what the training's trying to do, or what the training does more so, and strength training does both. Calisthenics mainly does one, because it's always going to be relative to your body weight, because that's all you have as a thing to lift. But it doesn't do different things. It does the same thing, but one can take it further. Anyway, back to the video. Definitions.
Regardless of which training style, both focus on pushing or pulling for the most part, meaning pushing or pulling an external weight, or pulling or pushing your own body weight to build strength and muscle.
That's also wrong. I mean, those are two classifications for types of movement, pushing versus pulling, but there's also hinging and squatting and like the different planes that you're pulling or pushing from. Like there's a lot more than just pulling or pushing. In calisthenics, there's far more just pulling versus pushing, because you only have your body to work with, so you can't hinge quite the same way and have the resistance be there, and you can't squat much more than what your own body is, so it doesn't, there's fewer things, but there's more than just pulling and pushing, but it's okay. Well, it's not, so far, not terrible.
The process of building muscle and strength is also the same with both types of training, which is through creating a progressive overload and muscular hypertrophy. A progressive overload is when you increase the resistance on a muscle over time, while reaching hypertrophy will tear your muscle fibers and allow them to grow back thicker and stronger. Now,
okay, yeah.
The fact is, your body doesn't know whether the force being applied to it is body weight or external weight. Just that it requires.
Right. So that argument there kind of nullifies, in my opinion, this entire debate. It depends on what you're trying to do with it. Your body doesn't know what's happening, whether it's your own body weight or whether it's external weight. So anything that you could do with body weight, you could also do with external weight. External weight's one of those things, though, where there's also more that you can do with it. So if your argument is which one's better, because you can do more with weight. So I guess if you had to choose one, you'd choose that, but I don't know why you'd choose one. It doesn't seem strange to me.
Requires a greater force to oppose the resistance placed on it. So yes, it is definitely possible to build an impressive, solid and shredded physique from focusing on one style of training over the other. That being said,
So what's interesting is he just compared weightlifting. The two photos that you just saw there. It was so what he's watching. What you're doing here is bodybuilding, and bodybuilding is not because he mentioned strength and muscle being built, and bodybuilding is not about building strength. Can you build strength with bodybuilding? Sure, but bodybuilding is primarily aesthetics. It's to look a certain way. So the way you train isn't for strength of musculature. The way you train in bodybuilding is for physique and symmetry around isolated muscle groups, which is it's a wholly different mechanism than training your for strength necessarily. I guess not wholly different. It's similar, but it's not. The goal is different. One is to look a certain way. One is to be able to do things with your strength. And I would say calisthenics plays a little bit more into being able to do stuff with your body weight. And most weightlifting, I would say, falls into the category of being able to do stuff, being able to move external objects or lift external objects, whereas it's different. So we'll see what he goes through here.
solid and shredded physique from focusing on one style of training.
Yeah, so right now he's comparing calisthenics body to bodybuilding, and it's funny to have two separate people doing it because it's just genetics. Like, these are two different dudes. Like, they're like, one could have superior genetics and just be born that way. One could have worked really hard for it, or they could have both come from the same place. But it's like, it's weird to compare aesthetic pursuits on two separate individuals because they're just different people. Maybe twins would be a decent comparison, but not this case.
Over the other. That being said, there are exercises in calisthenics that may benefit you more, just as there are weight training exercises that may also be more.
Damn, this guy does not do much weightlifting. I want to be really mean because that's what my head says, but I don't think that does anyone a favor. That was a really bad clean. And it's cool that he went for it and tried it, but he's got very impressive calisthenic skills. And let's remember what I said at the beginning of this video, like this guy, last video I watched him with a total douche nozzle. It looks like he's grown. It looks like he's developed his delivery style and probably his education. I hope he would have over 7.58 million subscribers. But yeah, no, it looks like he's grown, but that was, there's a lot going on with that clean that you could fix with very little
just as there are
work.
Weight training exercises that may also be
That was
beneficial.
more of a muscle clean than anything
If you want to apply
else.
the maximum weight to your chest, hamstrings, deltoids, quads, or glutes,
That was an at parallel squat, almost below.
this will be easier done with weight training, as it's as simple as adding another weight to the bar. When it comes to calisthenics, there's only so much you can do to increase the resistance.
Right. So the points we were making earlier, but he's making them here. It's good.
With changing angles of an exercise, or even reducing limbs, which will create an even greater resistance. But when it comes to body control,
Just some cool stuff. Like he's moving through He's moving through good ranges of motion. He's hitting lockout at stuff, just like we talked about in the last calisthenics video. If you're gonna do something like calisthenics, like do it like this. Like hit good standards. Hold in good places. Look for mechanics. Look for technique. I think one of the cool things about calisthenics is you have to move well. Like just the mechanical advantage to moving well in calisthenics can't be understated. Like you can kind of move external loads like shit to some degree because you could just be uber strong. But for calisthenics, there's just this nature, this relationship to the body that you have to move well in order to do the higher level stuff, which is cool.
balance, core strength, and relative strength, calisthenic style exercises will be your best bet. If your goal is to do handstand push-ups, planche push-ups, or 90-degree push-ups, as they require specific muscle groups and movement paths in combination with strength relative to your body weight. Same is true that no amount of planche push-ups alone will transfer to a 405-pound bench press. If you have a specific...
Super weird. I think to talk about them in isolation, like you have to do one or the other, or just doing one or the other would be better, is a strange perspective. The idea would be you do both. Like you do the things with strength that you give you more overall strength, like, and strength to weight ratio too. That lifting weights does that. As a small guy who had all ends of the spectrums, that's what you can do. Calisthenics similar, like he stated it here, like, yeah, you're not going to go have like a huge bench, but you will have capacity in a bench if you spend time doing calisthenics. You'll definitely lack capacity in a squat, and you can tell by this guy, his squat, just due to the nature of that mechanism being harder to overload with isometric holds the same way your shoulders can. Your shoulders and core can get a lot from calisthenics. The legs not as much when it comes to just raw power that they can put out and explosive power. Again, though, I don't know why he's treating them in isolation. Like you have to choose one or the other. It's like someone's holding a knife to your throat. And you got to choose this or this, and then otherwise that you're not doing fitness. Seems like a strange route to go. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Let's keep going.
The goal, the most efficient and effective way to achieve it is to train for it with the right exercises.
So if you have a goal, the most effective way to train for it is with the right exercise. Okay. Yeah, sure. But I think the fundamental thing there, though, the argument of the video is which one's better for strength and muscle. And it depends on what you're defining as strength or what kind of strength that you're looking for. So if you're looking to move your own body through space, then you should probably practice moving your own body through space. Like the things that we don't do as humans, we get bad at. So if you don't move your own body through space a lot, then you're going to have a hard time with it. If you only weightlift, you won't be good at calisthenics. If you only calisthenics, you won't be good at weightlifting. And it's a weird statement, I guess.
Specific goals or sports will also be a huge factor in determining what training style is best suited for you, but a combination of both is usually the best answer.
Hey,
now,
look at that.
These facts, let's hit the streets and hear what other people have to say and what their opinions are on which training.
That like single throwaway line, like a little bit of both, is probably going to be best. Like it's cool. It seems like he's matured. Like before, he was like, anything that's not calisthenics can suck it, and yeah, it's cool to see him grow.
Style is better, calisthenics or weights? And we're actually going around and getting people's opinions on a fitness-related question. Calisthenics or weights?
Yeah, I prefer calisthenics more. You just do a lot more with your body, you know, with weights, just pushing. It's kind of boring.
Calisthenics or weights? Which one's better?
He's like, he's at a calisthenics place, and he's like, well, which was better, calisthenics? He's like, I prefer calisthenics because that's what I do. And he's like, there's just too much pushing and pulling with weights. It's like, that's literally all calisthenics is pushing and pulling. Like by this guy's even own definition before, it's like just pushing and pulling. Whereas weights has far more dynamic things that you can do with it. You're pretty limited in calisthenics to just pushing and pulling. There's no hinging, there's no squatting really. So, but there's a lot you can do within pushing and pulling. So there's a lot there, but it's funny to hear him say it like that.
Calisthenics is the best for me. I watch your video.
I lost 40 pounds last year by watching you on YouTube.
Well, that's a huge honor, bro.
So the guy rolls up and he says, like, I lost 40 pounds watching your videos. Like, that's freaking rad. He didn't lose 40 pounds watching that guy's videos. He lost 40 pounds eating well and training. And this guy's videos, like, inspired him to start. And that's rad. Like, that's the only value I see in these, like, mega stars on this space is, like, someone might see that and actually be inspired by it. There is a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of people who go awry, and there's a lot of bullshit that's out here. But if that guy had success out of it, one guy had a better thing, like, that's awesome. I'm stoked to hear something like that.
Same question.
So this, he's getting some interesting answers. He's getting like kind of all over the spectrum, and these people are making good points. It's cool to see just random everyday Joes throwing stuff out there. He's also not like poo-pooing on the other side of it. So again, I feel like this guy's grown.
Calisthenics or weights? Which one's better?
Calisthenics.
Why?
The breathing, the heart rate is way higher.
Calisthenics or weights?
To be honest,
So the breathing and the heart rate is way higher in calisthenics is what he said. And it's like, well, no. Depends on how you're using weights and how you're using calisthenics. Like, you can make the breathing really low in calisthenics, but you can also make it really high. Same thing with weights. You can use it at low reps, high load, and the breathing is not very heavy. Some people who are doing 1 rep maxes might argue with you on that. Or you can do it faster at lighter loads and more dynamically, in which case the breathing can be very heavy. They can both require some deriving of ATP without the use of oxygen.
Honest, I feel like if you're getting started and working out, I feel like calisthenics is the best way to go because you have to be able to at least carry your body weight. Yeah, you can push 225, 285, that's cool. But are you really going to be hanging 205 pounds when you weigh 180? If you're hanging on a building or somewhere and you need to hold your body weight, calisthenics is going to help you more than weightlifting because you got to be able to make sure that you can pull yourself up.
All right, let's go.
So yeah, that guy had some good points. Like the idea of you should probably be able to move your own body weight through space before you dig into a bunch of external load. They can be done relatively simultaneously, especially under a coach's eye. But calisthenics, you're just a little limited in your training that you can do, especially in the beginning. So doing a combo of both helps. You just want to stay relatively simple on both and give yourself some time to progress. But I like the guy's statement of like, hey, look, we want to be able to move our own body weight through space. That's one of the most important things we're going to do is be able to move our own body weight through space.
Yeah, looks
Which
like
is true.
He's been in the game. We're gonna get his opinion. Calisthenics or weights? Calisthenics or weights?
Calisthenics is better because it stays with you. It stays with you forever. Weights is just something temporarily. You got to keep it up in order to maintain that physique. You're trying to
So it's interesting. The statement of it stays with you forever. I'm not really sure what he's referencing there, but what I would like take from that is that your coordination of being able to move your own body weight through space, that stays with you forever. Those neurological pathways that get built by doing something like calisthenics, where there's a lot of focus on technique of moving your own system, 100%. I think that definitely does stay with you. Weightlifting is the same thing, though. So, like, you will lose the physiological components of both of those over time, both calisthenics and weights. But the ability to move external objects efficiently will stay with you. You just don't see that quite as in your face as something like calisthenics that would stay with you. So, yeah, it's a good statement. I don't know if he meant it that deep, but that's where I went with it.
Well, if you're trying to shred down a little bit, lose out a little bit of weight, you want to do more calisthenics, focus less on the too much weight training.
Do you think that
guy's
weights helps you with calisthenics? Like, do you think it?
That guy's the guy talking about shredding down with calisthenics. That's not a good argument, but
Works the other way around as well.
weights help a little bit, but without the calisthenics, the weights won't do too much effect. The calisthenics start from the inside. Weights is basically the surface. That's why you see many times people train lifting up weights, and if they stop training, they turn flabby, and they also lose their swole. So calisthenics stay with you forever, man.
Could you shred up with weight training?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't you just do it with weights?
Because it depends how fast you're trying to get there, more or less where you're at in your body also.
Why?
Weights just blow you up and then it inflates you.
I don't know, I don't work out.
So why do you think weights doesn't?
So it's interesting. There's two guys now who've said like weights blow you up then deflate you, and that's not quite how weights work. I think a lot of people are really focused on this from a bodybuilding perspective. Like when you're doing localized muscle breakdown and rebuilding, you can have that more vast fluctuation of like they get bigger, and then when you stop working out, they just kind of as mass that sits there. But when you use your muscles how they're supposed to be used, like for function over form, and you let form follow the function, like you try to be able to do certain tasks, and then you go from there into allowing yourself to kind of become the physically looking whatever that task, doing it or chasing it gives you physically. That muscle stays for a lot longer. Whether it's and I think calisthenics inherently does that, just because in order to move your own body weight through space, like there's these very natural progressions that have to happen, and it's a lot harder to body build with calisthenics because you have to. It's more systemic. You're always holding almost all of your body, and you're naturally navigating a lack of isolation because the body's all connected to itself. Whereas in weightlifting, you can really isolate, which then puts the muscle as a standalone rather than using the organic system. Whereas weightlifting, whoa, don't know what I just did there. Whereas weightlifting is different than that. Weightlifting, like powerlifting, back squat, or Olympic lifting, even like those types of movements more dynamically with dumbbells and kettlebell movements, things like that, that stays with you for a long time because it's using the body for the function it's meant to be used for. So it's the same way that calisthenics is. You don't just touch a weight and blow up. Like, that's very different. If it worked that way, everyone would do it. Like, everyone who wants to be big, but so many people can't.
It does.
Doing weights, it look good, but it ain't really, you don't really got the power for it. Instead of calisthenics, like think about Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, they were skinny, but they had a lot of inside muscle. They did calisthenics, they built the inside muscles instead of the outside.
So there's a lot of different kind of weightlifting, and what he's referencing is just like people who are skinnier and more powerful because of the body weight training that they do. That's your system's smart. It's gonna like keep the weight that it needs and not have weight that it doesn't need if you're training really hard. So those guys he just mentioned all had specific tasks, martial arts, that they needed to be a part of. Both of those guys would have likely benefited from strength training, and I probably did strength training. Let me look it up right now. Like, did Bruce Lee do strength training? Did Bruce Lee lift weights? He lifted weights 3 nights a week. Squat rack, bench press, dumbbells, grip machine. Yeah. Wow, fancy that. Yeah, it makes sense that he would, because he understood this. So he lifted weights because it's important to do so to maintain the systemic overload that weights can do. It's not saying that calisthenics is bad. It's just this is a misunderstanding.
That is facts. I can't argue with that. Yo,
Well, those weren't facts because they were wrong.
Let's go.
Hey. Oh yeah, you pushing for real. You pushing for real, dog. That shit takes some weight.
That's cool. I mean, I love.
I used to wake up, wash my face, walk out the door, and it was pimple city. It was not giving. And then I.
You gonna get it? You gotta teach me how to do that shit.
You got me into calisthenics like 3 years ago, though.
What?
And I watched your video. I was like, damn, my goal is to be able to do a muscle up at some point.
You got it now?
I hit 10 the other day. So
Let's see it.
yeah, right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Let's see it. Put him on the spot.
Again,
What?
people who like are stoked on this. Like, the only thing that
Amazing, man.
I have
Just watching videos online. Calisthenics or weights? Which one's better?
The only thing I have a hard time with is when people say, "Hey, like you did this for me." It's like it's not. They did it. They worked for themselves, right? But they were inspired by it, so that's cool. Like, I love the fact that he's inspiring some people. Just the problem would be like if he then goes says, and that guy, you know, his leader says, "This stuff sucks," then he's gonna also say this stuff sucks, especially if he's not gonna dig into the depth of what the guy might be saying. So that's where the celebrityness kind of distorts the industry.
Better.
I think there's a time and place for each, depending on what you're trying to do. I would say in terms of like functionality though, and like actually being a good athlete, calisthenics is a better option. You know, push yourself in terms of mobility, you know what I mean, endurance and shit like that. And sometimes weight training can allow you to build your body up, but you might not necessarily be a better athlete because of it.
Yeah, I mean, both can do that. You can use them both poorly. But there's a reason that all of the highest athletic endeavors that we have in our society, the footballs, baseballs, wrestling, like everything on a sport level, on a bigger level, they all do weight training. And the reason for that is because there's things you can't do with calisthenics in terms of speed and power. And that's what athleticism is an expression of speed and power mixed with coordination and body awareness and whatnot. So
Actually going around asking people which one is better, calisthenics or weights?
I like calisthenics more. Calisthenics all day.
Calisthenics, man.
Calisthenics for me. Calisthenics, because man, the energy out here is unreal, unmatched. At the gym, you kind of feel like you're left out. Over here, no matter what your skill level is, there's somebody that's gonna show you something.
that's a bad gym. And he's got a group of friends that want to come train. Awesome. It's great that they want to all go to calisthenics, but that's not the mechanism that is poor there. It's the application of it. So it's not the tool of calisthenics or weightlifting. It's literally just the scenario that he's in. It's a weird... I mean, that would be like saying, like... if someone you know was saying, hey, what's better, macaroni or French fries? And then you're like, well, every time I eat French fries at this store right here, I start vomiting. So clearly macaroni's better because when I eat it, it doesn't do anything. And it's like, that's not the thing that's going on there. We're not even talking about the two separate things. We're literally just saying you're going to a place that's poisoning you with bad French fries every time. So it's a weird comparison. Anyway.
So for me, I like the most. I used to lift weights for maybe 5 years and came to calisthenics. I find it more motivated. It's also more functional in everyday life.
I like how it's a mixture of strength and athleticism.
I think calisthenics like builds agility, functional strength, like you said. So that's why.
Yeah, let's get some. Let's get a couple for sure. Let's go, baby. Thank you guys so much, man. I'll be back. I'm gonna go ask some more people.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. I like the fit. Thank you, man. This is the new fit that just came out. That's brand new.
Things 100%, especially being in the military. You could weight lift as much as you would. You could be in a 1,000-pound club, but the moment somebody asks you to do, can you do 30 push-ups? It's hard.
Why do you think that's so? How come it doesn't translate?
It's a good question. I hope you find the right answer out here.
What do you mean, how come it doesn't translate? Oh, well, you can lift a whole bunch, but you can't push your own body weight 30 times? I guarantee you if that person could bench a whole bunch, they could do 30 push-ups of their own body weight. Like, if they could do their body weight benched that many times, they'd be fine. It's because they don't do it. It's like comparing a deadlift to push-ups. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a different mechanism overall. It's a weird, like, there's some weird comparisons here that they're just nonsensical.
Well, we're going around asking people, man. We're trying to
Nope.
Calisthenics or weights?
Weights.
Why?
Weights put on mass.
Could you gain mass with calisthenics?
Not the same kind of mass. Lifting puts on a different type of mass than calisthenics.
So all of these people are speaking from an aesthetics point of view, and I think that's one of my biggest issues with. It's my biggest struggle with the fitness industry in general. Like, yes, aesthetics are cool. You know, people like to look a certain way, and training allows you to look a certain way. However, that as the pursuit is not, can be done very poorly in terms of where psychologically you go. It can also be really physically destructive. So all of these people are thinking about like training as just to look a certain way. And in that context, both of the things that we're talking about are they're meaningless in my opinion, because they're not being used for anything meaningful, which would be the ability to live a better life in terms of your ability to do what you want, however you want, for however long you want. Because both are necessary for that, calisthenics and strength training. And they both do similar things but different things and should be used in conjunction. So the question's a weird one, and I think it's made to antagonize. And he's getting the responses kind of he wants on both sides. But yeah, to most people think of weightlifting in the context of bodybuilding, and they tend to think of calisthenics in the kind of, I don't know, more gymnasty. It's because that's what they see, and that's what it is. But weightlifting has a giant demographic that is, and a huge component, section of it that has nothing to do with bodybuilding. You might get bodybuilding-like outcomes, but very different. And this guy's talking about it for bodybuilding.
Calisthenics is good for your fast twitch muscle fibers. If you're playing sports, lifting lighter weight, doing calisthenics is a whole lot better for you.
Do you think you can do the same thing with weights to activate your fast twitch muscle?
I think so. I mean, you can do negative reps. Is what I do a lot of. I mean, I don't ever lift heavy. I always do sets of 15 to 18, to be honest with you.
How much weight do you do, like 15 to 18?
It depends on what I'm doing. When I do bench press, for example, I weigh 205 pounds. I might do 180 to 200 pounds. I mean, I don't even lift over my body weight.
How many sets?
3 to 4.
Do you use like progressive overload, or you use the same weight every time?
No, progressive overload. I'll do bands, drop sets.
Excellent, man. You're in great shape, bro.
So progressive overload can happen, like he's saying, via not actually overloading the system with a single load, but it can happen with reps as well, which is how you would do it with something like calisthenics. But it can also be done with load, where you're progressively going heavier and heavier and heavier, so your system breaks down. It does different things. One, I guess that's where he was kind of going with the absolute strength. But you can do the same thing, you just with body weight. Like the same type of overload allows you to do something you previously couldn't. So, which is what progressive overload is. When you go heavier and heavier loads, you get the capacity to do something you previously couldn't loading wise. It's the same thing when you think about calisthenics. You're positioning yourself in different ways or doing more reps, which is allowing you to do more load, in this case volume, because you can do another rep, which is another, whatever you weigh, 180 pounds in this guy's case, or 200 pounds. But it's the same general process. And this guy said you're in shape, but that is only referencing the guy he's looking at's physique. It has nothing to do with what this guy's able to accomplish, which is, I guess that's my biggest beef, is because you have no idea if this guy's in shape. This guy might not even be able to run a 40. He might not be able to do 30 push-ups like we said. I mean, with the bench press numbers, like he said, he probably can. But it's interesting because this guy's cardiorespiratory system could be non-existent. Who knows? Might be great, though.
Shit, that can help a lot of people, man. I prefer weight training. I enjoy lifting heavy. Calisthenics is good. It's harder. You exhaust yourself a little bit more.
Can you replicate something similar or pretty much the same thing with weights?
So the reason he said it's harder is because he enjoys weightlifting. He doesn't enjoy calisthenics. Anything you enjoy is going to be easier for the most part. Psychologically, physiologically, they're both equally difficult. They're just difficult in different ways.
Yeah, you can.
I personally love body weight. I feel like I can get the most fit and healthy from just my own body. But I love weights for like adding strength.
Do you think that you can also have like the same strength doing calisthenics?
I think so. Weights are just like...
You'll notice that anyone who says, I mean, obviously because of his bent, he's a calisthenics guy. So anytime someone says weight training, he goes, don't you think you could also do that with calisthenics? But he doesn't when someone says, not often at least, he doesn't go when someone says, I prefer calisthenics. He doesn't go, well, don't you think you could also do that with weights? He doesn't do it quite the same way, nearly as aggressively.
Like maybe
you can tell what he thinks.
What about you?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I feel like it happens faster with weights because it's just easier for progressive overload. You know, there's a 35 pound, there's a 40 pound, so it goes in increments of 5. So it's a lot easier versus in calisthenics bodyweight training. To do progressive overload, you may have to know a more advanced calisthenics exercise, and that may be a longer of a jump. A more advanced movement may apply a lot more resistance. As weights, you can just easily go up in weight.
Yeah. I think just doing everything is the best.
Wow, the final line, just doing everything. It's interesting. So, honestly, not a bad video. The guy really does seem like he's evolved over the years to kind of have a better, a more well-rounded perspective and less antagonistic with his views. That's cool to see. It's cool to see someone develop over the years and do that. All in all, I don't think he answered the question. I also don't think there was a genuine comparison of anything that they were meaningfully going for. There's nothing measurable there, really. So when he said it at the beginning, he even mentioned the word strength, but what is he defining as strength? Is he defining strength? Like, what was his actual terminology that he used? The very first line, he said, which is better for...
Be asking different types of athletes what they think in their opinion, but first, let's get into the best for building strength and muscle.
What's best for building strength and muscle? But he didn't say what he meant by strength. Is he looking at the classic definition of strength as the contractile potential of any given muscle? Or is he looking for something that's more applicable? Because potential only speaks to what, well, it only speaks to potential. It only looks to what's possible versus maybe the productive application of it. Like, can he use that muscle? So I would say bodybuilding is more looking at individual muscle strength, like the productive application of it, or the contractile potential of it, versus the overall, can I use this? Because bodybuilding definitely doesn't say, can I use this? In which case, I would say calisthenics, if you compared it to bodybuilding, would be a far more applicable strength. But he didn't have any metrics there we could really measure it off of. He's not going detailed enough for us to make a fair comparison. And then what was the other thing?
We're going to be asking different weights or calisthenics. Which one is best for building strength and muscle?
Strength and muscle. So he just says generic strength and muscle, and it's just, there's no real comparison that can be made if we don't have a metric to measure. That's it. Not a bad video. It seemed really open-ended and open, but obviously with a bent a little bit towards calisthenics, but it was not a bad video. In fact, I'm impressed. I'm glad it's gone the way it did. Anyway, it's Pat here. out. Stay virtuous as always. You guys rule.